My name is Nora Whitaker. I'm 26 years old, and I never imagined that curiosity would be the reason my world collapsed. What started as a harmless habit watching the apartment across from mine turned into something I couldn't walk away from. I thought I was just bored, just lonely, just healing, but I saw something I wasn't supposed to see, and then someone saw me back. This is my true story, one that still makes me triple lock my doors at night. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because someone out there is also watching someone and has no idea what's coming next. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. I had just moved into my new apartment in downtown Seattle, a fourth-floor unit with a leaky faucet, dusty windows, and a perfect view of the building across the narrow alley. I'd gotten it cheap too. Cheap, but I didn't ask questions. I was still unpacking my life after a bad breakup that had left me with exactly 2 suitcases and a broken lease. I couldn't afford to keep paying. The apartment was temporary. I told myself, just a place to breathe, to disappear, to start over. I didn't expect it to become the only thing I'd be afraid to leave. It started on a rainy Tuesday. I was curled up on my couch eating cold Chinese takeout and watching Netflix when I noticed a light flicker on in the building across from mine. Directly opposite my living room window, apartment 4C, I could see everything, no curtains, just floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a minimalistic apartment and a man standing dead center, facing forward like he was waiting for something. He was tall, pale, dressed in all black. At first I thought maybe he was on a Zoom call, standing still talking to someone out of frame. But no, he wasn't speaking, just standing watching. I laughed it off, told myself people were weird in big cities. But the next night he was there again, same time, same position, still as a statue. I tried not to stare, but there was something magnetic about the stillness, the tension, and the air that made it feel like I was peeking into a scene that wasn't meant for anyone else. He stood for 13 minutes that second night, then turned, walked away, and flicked the light off. I started counting the seconds. By the end of that week, it had become a routine. 10:43 p.m. The light in 4C flicked on, and the man in black appeared. Never earlier, never later. He never looked at me, never waved, just stared at something I couldn't see. Some nights he stood longer, some nights just a few seconds. I couldn't stop watching. I started canceling evening plans, started eating dinner earlier, started pausing my shows by 10:40. I didn't tell anyone. It was just a weird thing, like a secret habit I couldn't shake. Then one night I waved. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to break the tension. Maybe I was curious if he even knew I existed. But I raised my hand slowly, casually, and gave the smallest wave. He didn't react, didn't even blink, just stood there. The next night he didn't appear, nor the one after, and that made something shift in me. I missed him. Missed the strangeness, the mystery, the thrill of that silent ritual. I hated how much I missed a man who had never spoken, never smiled, never even looked directly at me. I started leaving my window open, left the lamp on, wrote, "Where'd you go?" in Sharpie on a notepad, and held it up one night like an idiot. And then on the 7th night of his absence, he returned. This time he was already facing me when the lights flicked on. No hesitation, no gradual turn, just eyes locked directly into mine. I froze. I don't know how long we stared at each other. It could have been seconds, could have been hours. My hand trembled on the edge of the windowsill. He didn't move, didn't smile, but he knew now that I was watching, that I'd been watching. And he was watching back. That night I dreamed of glass shattering and hands crawling through broken windows. The next day I closed the blinds. I tried to forget. I told myself it was over, that it was harmless, that maybe he was just someone weird like me. Maybe he wasn't a threat at all. But that morning when I stepped out to grab coffee from the cart across the street, the barista, someone I never met, handed me a napkin folded into fourths. "Guy dropped this for you earlier," he said. "Said you lived in the red building." I opened the napkin. Inside was a sketch of me standing at my window, hair pulled back, hoodie off, one shoulder holding a cup of tea. Below it, 3 words: "Don't look away." I dropped the napkin, and Ronnie called my landlord, asked if the apartment across the alley 4C was rented. She sounded confused. "That unit's been empty since December. No one signed a lease since." I asked if anyone had been in or out. "Only maintenance, and that was over a month ago." I called the police. They did a wellness check on the unit. Nothing, empty, unfurnished, unused. I could see them from my window. 2 officers and the landlord unlocking the door, walking through. No man in black, no light, just dust and dead air. But that night at 10:43, the light in 4C turned on again. No one was visible, no movement. Just a single chair, now placed exactly where he used to stand, facing me. Stood frozen in my living room, staring at that chair until 11:03 p.m. when the light turned off again. I moved out 2 days later, but the night before I left, I got one final note slipped under my door, plain white paper: "No Handwriting on the front and side was another sketch. This time it was me sleeping in my bed, hair splayed on the pillow eyes. Close drawn from the foot of my bed, the paper smelled like dust and static. No signature, no message, just 2 red dots drawn on the foot. Window in the background is window watching mine eye. Didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, that came later, but because I felt haunted in a way that didn't involve footsteps or heavy breathing. It was psychological quiet, something colder than fear itself. It was the realization that while I'd been watching him, he had already been inside my space. I stared at the sketch until the paper felt soaked with meaning. I couldn't fully digest the angle of it, the perspective he had to have stood inside my apartment at the foot of my bed and studied me long enough to draw my position from memory. And those 2 red dots on the window behind me, I stared at them for nearly 20 minutes before I realized they weren't just random ink. They were placement markers, like the kind used by theater crews or crime scene investigators. 2 points of alignment right where his window would have framed mine. My stomach twisted. Was it where cameras had been set up? A laser sight? The thought of him watching from behind a lens while I slept made my blood itch. I tore the sketch to pieces and flushed it. It felt symbolic, but it solved nothing. I was packed and out of the apartment by noon, left the keys in a plastic bag hanging from the mailbox slot. I didn't wait to see if the building manager showed up. I booked a week-long stay at a mid-range hotel near the university district using cash, no ID. It was a small attempt at disappearing, like wiping fingerprints off a glass. No one knew you touched that night. I covered every mirror in the room with towels, unplugged the hotel phone, and placed a chair against the door. I told myself I was being paranoid, but paranoia doesn't feel like this. This was certainty with no evidence, dread with no explanation. At 10:43 p.m., I couldn't stop myself. I walked to the hotel window, pulled the curtain slightly back. No lights in any nearby windows, no chair, no man. Still, I stood there for 20 minutes, silently daring something to move. I eventually collapsed into the scratchy sheets and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. Next few days were a blur. I didn't return to work. I told them I had the flu. My inbox flooded with messages I ignored. I spent most of the time researching not him, but the building. I dug through property records, old lease documents, anything public. Apartment 4C had indeed remained unrented for several months. No new tenant paperwork, but the unit had been part of an old complaint 5 years ago, buried in legal documents filed by a former resident, a woman who'd reported being stalked by someone in that exact unit. Her complaint was dismissed after she moved away and never followed up. I found her name, Janine Ellery, tracked her down on social media, or tried to. Her name had been erased almost everywhere. No recent photos, no posts. But I found a comment she'd left on a forum dedicated to apartment nightmares. The username was guest43. The comment read, "It doesn't matter. If the lights are off, he still sees you. The window across isn't a window. It's a doorway." My skin went cold. I messaged the admin, begged for contact, told them it was urgent. Hours passed. Then came a reply. "She doesn't speak anymore, not to strangers. Not even to herself sometimes." Attached was a phone number. I called it. Rang 6 times before someone picked up, a woman's voice, shaky, older than expected. "Don't say his name," she said. I didn't ask how she knew. She just continued. I moved across the country, changed my name, got therapy, but he followed, not in person, not physically, in presence and things, in dreams and windows. Asked her how she knew it was real, that it wasn't just trauma rewiring her brain. She answered slowly, "Because he drew me before I ever met him." I found the sketches under my pillow one night in my own house, hundreds of miles away. He always finds you. I wanted to throw the phone. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. "What do I do now?" She was silent then. "You wait and you don't look back, not until he wants you to. When you see the 2 dots again, that means you've been marked." The call dropped that night. I sat in the hotel bathroom with the light on, door locked, too afraid to even blink. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll social media. I just waited. 10:43 came and went. Silence, no signs, no knocks, but I kept feeling like someone was pressing gently on the back of my mind, like a thumbprint being made in memory. I eventually passed out on the floor. When I woke, it was morning. The hotel door was still locked, chair still wedged beneath the handle. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe it was over, but when I opened the bathroom door, everything in the room was changed. The towels I draped over the mirrors were gone, neatly folded on the desk. The notepad by the lamp now had a sketch me asleep on the tile, the light from the bathroom perfectly captured. My hair twisted in the way I remembered laying. And on the mirror above the desk were 2 small red dots drawn with lipstick, my lipstick eye. Checked the door again, no forced entry, called the front desk. They insisted no staff and entered. No cleaning, no deliveries, nothing that demanded the security footage. They told me the cameras were under maintenance that night. I hung up, packed my things. Again, I got in my car, my old beat-up Corolla that I hadn't touched in weeks, and drove. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I had to go. I passed highways, cities, motels. Eventually landed in a rural town 5 hours south. I didn't check. In under my real name, I used cash, found a place with no online booking system, no Wi-Fi. The kind of spot you'd only find if you were already lost. I stayed there for 3 days, but on the 4th day, I saw him again, not in the hallway, not in the parking lot. In a photo, the front desk clerk was showing me local tourist spots on a map. Pulled out a photo album of happy guests the owner kept, and there he was in one of the snapshots, standing behind a family, blurry but unmistakable black. Clothing still, posture, blank expression, and in his hands, a sketchbook. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I took the photo, went to my room, and started writing this down because now I understand something Janine never said out loud. He's not just a man, he's a pattern, a ritual, a repetition that hides in routines and windows and glances. He only appears to people who look too long, who watch back, who think curiosity is harmless. He lives in the reflection of your own attention. You make him real, and once you do, never stops watching. I left the motel the same night I saw the photo of him. No checkout, no goodbyes, just a crumpled snapshot, stuffed in my coat pocket, and the sense that my presence in that place had already been marked by him, that the window wasn't even necessary anymore because I was the window now. I drove until the sun came up, unsure if I was chasing safety or running from something I couldn't name, but something had changed since I saw the image. I understood it. Wasn't just him watching me, it was the idea of him growing sharper, stronger, closer. I hadn't slept in 3 days. I hadn't looked in a mirror since the bathroom incident. I stopped checking my phone, stopped calling anyone, and yet every radio I passed in the car scan buzzed into static at exactly 10:43 p.m. No matter the station, no matter the city. By the 6th time, I ripped the stereo console from the dash and threw it out the window onto the highway. That silence felt safer than the sound of patterns forming around me. Ended up in Idaho, staying in a cabin I found on a handwritten flyer pinned to a gas station corkboard. No GPS, no online reviews, just an address scribbled beneath the words, clean, quiet, private. It was everything I needed. The cabin was buried deep in the woods, no neighboring homes, no cell signal. I handed the owner cash through a small screen window. A wrinkled man with pale eyes and the smell of burnt pine wood clinging to him. He never asked my name, just gave me a key and said, watch the windows at night. I didn't ask what he meant, I already knew. First night in the cabin was still, no dreams, no lights, no interruptions, but the second night, I found the 2 red dots again, this time on a sheet of paper slid under the cabin's front door. Just the dots, no drawing, no words. I didn't open the door, I didn't move, I just stared at them and tried to remember how I got here, to this place where something was following, not just my steps, but my thoughts, my attention, my focus. I thought of Janine's warning that the window wasn't a window, that it was a doorway. I looked at the small window above the kitchen sink, and for the first time I saw it differently, like a mirror, looking into another world, or worse, another version of my world where someone else was mimicking every moment I lived. I shut every curtain in the cabin, taped black trash bags over the glass. I even unplugged the microwave because its screen reflected too much of the room. Still, I could feel a presence pressing from the other side of the silence on. The 3rd night, I had the dream again. But this time it wasn't of him, it was of me standing at the foot of someone else's bed sketching. I was looking down at a sleeping woman, maybe in her 30s, blonde, unfamiliar. But my hands were holding the pencil and my face was calm. When I woke, the sketch was beside me, real on paper. And it was exactly what I dreamed. I screamed, tore the page apart, and burned the pieces in the cabin's fireplace. But the smell of the paper wasn't right. It smelled like me, like my shampoo, my sheets, like it came from my apartment in Seattle. That was when I realized this wasn't about him watching me anymore. This was about becoming him. The longer I stayed isolated, obsessed, focused on him, the more he rewrote who I was. And maybe that's how he stayed alive through other people, by making them the new mirror, the new sketch artist, the new watcher I had to find Janine, not her forum posts. I dug up old property records, found a trail of PO boxes that eventually led to a small community center in Ohio where she worked under a new name. I booked a flight using a gift card, traveled with a hoodie, sunglasses, and the kind of fear that vibrates in your jaw. When I walked into the building and asked for her by her new name, the woman at the desk hesitated. She only sees people by appointment. I looked around the room. Every window was covered I leaned in and whispered, "He left a sketch on my bed, the dots are back." I was in her office within 10 minutes. Janine was older than I imagined. Early 40s maybe, but with the kind of eyes that looked like they hadn't blinked in years. We sat in silence at first, then she poured tea and spoke. "He's not a man," she said. "He's a virus. Not of code, not digital, a psychic pattern. Once you see him, really see him, he starts to stitch into your routine. He uses attention like fuel. Obsession like oxygen." I asked her how it ends. She laughed bitterly. "It doesn't. You just stop giving him a reflection. You stop being the mirror. The moment you make eye contact, you give him the stage. You make him real." I was quiet, then I asked, "What if it's too late?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a sealed envelope. "I've written instructions. Burn them after you read them. Do not write anything else down after. Don't draw, don't record. You feed him through your documentation. That's why he sketches. That's why you started sketching." That night, I sat in a cheap motel with the envelope and read every word inside. Were 5 steps, the 5th one broke me. It said, "When you see yourself in the window, it means he's inside you. You will want to open the door. You must not." The next day, I stopped writing in my journal. I deleted every sketch I had on my phone. I scrubbed in my digital footprint. I burned the envelope as instructed, but the window didn't let me go back. At the motel just after 10:43 p.m., I saw it. Not from the outside, from the inside. My reflection in the room's mirror, it moved before I did, just a fraction of a second ahead, like a rehearsal. Like someone practicing being me. I turned away. Slammed the mirror to the ground, but the crack it left? It split straight across my reflection's mouth like a smile. I haven't looked into another mirror since now. I write only with my thoughts, quiet ones that can't be traced, but I still hear the scratching at night like pencil on paper. I know he's still out there, maybe inside others, maybe inside me, and I know what the red dots mean now. They are recording points, fixed focus markers. He's always composing, always watching, and the moment you see him, he's already made room for you right there across the window. I spent the next week avoiding all surfaces that could reflect. No mirrors, no windows, not even the glimmer of a turned-off TV screen. I kept my phone face down, never turned on the front camera, avoided glass doors, even puddles, because once you know he can watch you through reflections, you begin to understand how thin the wall is between being alone and being seen. But no matter what I avoided, he still found cracks in dreams and shadows that bent the wrong way in moments where time stuttered. And I would blink only to find a chair that wasn't there before. I knew I needed answers, not guesses, not metaphors. I wanted history. Someone somewhere had to know what he was. If not his name, then his origins. So I went to the one place I hadn't yet, the archivist. That's what they called her online, a username on deep paranormal forums that always signed off with "nothing haunts without record." Her posts were old but detailed. She once tracked a haunted piano across 4 states based on auction listings. If anyone could trace a psychic entity that embedded itself in mirrors and sketches, it was her. I used a burner laptop, posted a thread with no title. Just a single image, the red dots. Within hours, I got a message. "If you're still alive, come to Galesburg. Bring no medal, no recordings, come alone." It sounded like bait, but at this point, fear had become a numb shadow of itself. I rented a car, drove 12 hours in silence, and arrived at the coordinates she sent me. A half-abandoned Victorian-style library on the edge of an overgrown cemetery. I expected it to feel cold, cursed, but it felt preserved, like time had decided not to enter. Archivist was waiting on the front steps, a woman in her 60s, gray braid. Wearing a long coat, even in the sun, she didn't smile, didn't offer her name. Just opened the door and led me down a spiral staircase that disappeared into candlelit stone. We passed shelves of newspaper clippings, cassette tapes, VHS reels, and sketchbooks. Every object was tagged with red thread. Some were burned at the edges, some were locked in glass. And every single object, she told me, had come from a different place. A different person, but the same story. They all thought it was a man at first, she said, tracing her fingers over a cracked photograph. Tall, silent, always at 10:43 p.m., always watching. Some called him a ghost. Some called him a curse, some a fragment of thought made flesh, but they all called him the mirror. Walker. Eventually, I told her about the dreams, the sketches, the drawings left on my bed. I told her about Janine, about the napkin at the coffee cart, about the sketch of me from the foot of my bed. The archivist listened, never interrupting, just flipping through her dusty records until she stopped at a page handwritten, dated 1904. "There," she said, pointing to an entry. "A girl in Vermont, same time of night. She saw him in the mirror of her vanity, told her mother locked the mirror away. Days later, the girl was found at the base of the stairs, broken neck. In her pocket was a sketch of her mother sleeping. She flipped again. 192-11946. 1983. Always someone watching, always someone being watched, and always the final. Sketch made from the inside. How do you stop him? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was a whisper inside a tomb. The archivist sighed. You can't erase a pattern, but you can rewrite it, give it something new to reflect. Something unpredictable. I didn't understand. I asked her again. She turned to me and said, "You have to show him what he can't draw." I left the archive just before dusk. She handed me a red envelope and told me not to open it until the very last moment. When the reflection moves first, she said, "You'll have one chance. If you blink, it's over." I nodded, even though I didn't understand what I was agreeing to that night. I returned to a motel, not the one before, but it didn't matter. Motels all smell the same. Fear clings to the curtains like mildew. I taped paper over the mirrors, but I left one small mirror uncovered exactly as the archivist instructed. It had to be by choice, she said. He can't use it if it's unintentional. I placed the red envelope next to the mirror, sat on the bed, and waited. At 10:43 p.m. Nothing happened. No flickering lights, no footsteps, no movement in the mirror. Then at 10:44, the mirror rippled, not visually, not like a movie. It was more like I felt the air around it shift, like the temperature dropped only in that frame of glass. And then I saw my reflection, but her mouth twitched before mine. A smirk, a signal. I reached for the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single piece of paper with a hand-drawn eye in red ink. Below it a message: "Draw him first, but not as he is, as he was." I grabbed a pen and paper and started sketching. I didn't know what I was doing, but my hand moved as if something older was guiding it. I drew not a man, but a boy alone, looking into a cracked mirror, crying, afraid before the stillness, before the rituals, before the haunting. I gave him humanity, weakness. I made him mortal on the page, and when I looked at my reflection was no longer smiling. It was screaming. Then the mirror cracked, not shattered, just a single line across the glass, a split smile like before. But this time it was on his side. He couldn't reflect back anymore. I dropped the paper, breathing like I'd run a marathon. My ears were ringing, my nose bled slightly, but I was still here alone. No sketch appeared that night, no red dots, nothing. I called Janine the next morning. Told her what happened. She didn't answer, but I left a message. I think it's over, at least for me, but if he comes back, we know now he's not unstoppable. He's just repeating what he's been taught, and we don't have to follow the pattern anymore. But that night when I turned on the hotel TV for the first time in weeks, the static cleared for just a second and a single frame flickered. A sketch of someone else asleep in a new city with a window wide open. It began again on a Thursday, just after the rain. Not in my mirror, not in my room, not even in my city, but in a short email I wasn't supposed to receive. It came from an anonymous address with no subject line, no body text, just a single attachment. A scan of a sketch, not of me, not of him, but of a new girl, younger, maybe 19 or 20, sleeping just like I had been in the first drawing I received. But this sketch was looser, almost incomplete, like someone was in the middle of remembering her while drawing. The background had hints of a cluttered dorm room, textbooks, fairy lights, a bottle of nail polish on a knit stand, and 2 red dots drawn on the window behind her bed. My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe it was a hoax, a misfire, spam. But the file name of the attachment was the address of a university, a real one 2 states away. My hands shook as I opened a search tab. It took less than 3 minutes to find the dorm room layout from the background. Room 204, East Hall, St. Midway University. I don't know what compelled me to drive there. I could have ignored it, could have blocked the sender. But something inside me whispered, "You stopped him for yourself, but not for Harry." Reached the university by Saturday afternoon. It was an open campus, no ID. Checks at the gate, just groups of kids walking in circles of hope and heartbreak, totally unaware that one of them was already being watched. I didn't know what I'd do. Knock on the door? Pretend to be delivering something? Warn her like a lunatic and get laughed at? But I didn't need a plan, because the moment I stepped into the hallway of East Hall, I saw her, the girl from the sketch. She was standing at the vending machine, her head tilted to one side, watching the spiral of candy get stuck. Her name tag read Morales. I stood frozen, the sketch still burned into my memory. When she walked back into her room and closed the door behind her, I moved fast. I slipped a note under the door, nothing dramatic, just one line. "Cover your mirror tonight, please." I waited in the hallway for nearly an hour. She never opened the door, never stepped out. Eventually, I heard music from her laptop, soft indie vocals, the kind of background noise that young people believe keeps them safe. I walked away, drove to a cheap motel 3 blocks away, sat on the edge of the bed, knees bouncing, wondering if I'd done enough, but at 10:43 p.m. I knew I hadn't. The television in the motel flickered on its own, something it hadn't done in weeks. I turned to see the screen blank until a single line of text appeared. She didn't cover it. I drove back like I was possessed, pulled up outside the dorm, and looked up. Room 204's light was still on. I couldn't see inside, not directly, but I saw the movement of someone pacing. Then suddenly stillness, that stillness I knew too well. I wanted to scream, to run up and kick the door down, but I knew how dangerous attention was. He fed on it. She was feeding him now. Without knowing, without meaning to, I spent the night parked outside the building, watching, unable to sleep. At 3:11 a.m. her light turned off, not dimmed, not flickered, snapped off like a switch thrown in anger. Next morning I waited outside the student cafe until I saw her again, alive, walking, laughing, but paler. She had the look I recognized in the mirror months ago, the look of someone who hadn't slept, who had started checking behind herself in mirrors. I followed her. I know how that sounds. I hated myself for it. But she was alone in something I couldn't leave her in, and I needed to know. Had he chosen her, or had she chosen to see him? That night I left a second note, a longer one. I told her about the drawings, the red dots, the man in the window. I didn't ask her to believe me. I just begged her to email me if anything strange happened. I left my burner address, then I walked away, hands trembling, eyes glassy with the weight of knowing the pattern had chosen. Again, 3 days passed, then came the email subject. You were right, the message said. He was standing in the corner of my mirror. I blinked and he was gone, but I can still feel where he stood. Can you help? Emmy? I didn't reply, not yet. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I saw the attachment, another sketch of me looking directly into the camera with one hand on a motel curtain, my lips parted like I was just about to speak. She hadn't drawn it. I knew that she had found it, or worse, he had shown it to Harry through the laptop across the bed. My ears were ringing again, the pulse in my throat ached. How was he still using me? I had followed the rules, I had rewritten the pattern, but that was the lie. He never needed a mirror, he only needed a witness. He could jump from reflection to retelling. He could use stories as reflections just as much as glass every time someone read about him. They made him sharper, every sketch passed along made his edges more defined. I hadn't stopped the pattern, I'd spread it, and the worst part? I wasn't scared, I felt relief, because now someone else saw it too. We were mirrors to each other, and he was behind both of you. See, met her in person 3 nights later, not in a dorm, not in public, but in a church basement where the electricity hummed too softly and every fluorescent bulb buzzed with secrets, the kind of place where lost souls gather because they know no one looks for them there. She wore a hoodie with the sleeves pushed halfway up her arms, the kind of posture someone adopts when they've stopped believing in comfort. She looked at me like someone who had seen their reflection try to blink first, and I knew then, without question, that we were both infected, not just by him, not just by the watching, but by the weight of trying to untangle something older than either of us. I think he's testing me, she said, like he wants to see how much I'll notice before I crack. I understood that. That's how it starts, not with terror, but with tension, the kind that builds so slowly you start mistaking it for curiosity. She told me about the static in her phone calls, the delay in her reflection, how her sketches began to draw themselves if she stared too long. I wasn't even holding the pen, she said. My hand was just moving. We needed to end it. Not for us, that was already impossible, but maybe for whoever was next. We needed to find the first mirror, the original sketch, the source of the pattern, because the archivist was right. Patterns can't be killed, but they can be rewritten. I called her again. She didn't sound surprised. The first occurrence we know of was in 1889, she said. A child named Eliza Wren. She was found sitting in front of her, vanity eyes open, unmoving for 2 full days. No food, no water, just staring into the glass. Her father was an inventor, built a camera with mirrors inside it. Tried to capture something no one else had seen. It malfunctioned, burned their house down. She survived. But afterward she started sketching sketches of people she'd never met. One of them was you. That shouldn't have been possible, but I had stopped asking how long ago. I asked where the sketch was. In a collector's archive, she said. A man who gathers haunted artifacts. It's in the basement of his estate in Maine. You'll have to go together. He doesn't allow digital devices. Everything there is analog. Says it keeps the patterns from spreading. We flew out 2 days later under aliases. Morales, her real name, was Ava. Didn't sleep on the flight. She just kept her eyes on the window reflection. At one point I dozed off, and when I woke up I saw her sketching again, not on paper, on the back of the boarding pass. A face, my face. You look like this while you slept, she said, not blinking. But something else, something was watching you, watching yourself. I took the paper and ripped Without reading, I didn't tell her, but my ears had started ringing again the same way they had before the last time he got too close. Collector's estate sat like a mausoleum on a cliffside half buried in fog. He greeted us at the door with white gloves and the smell of paper rot in his coat. "You came for Eliza's mirror," he said before we could speak. "But it's not the glass that matters, it's the sketch she made after." He led us down a spiral staircase not unlike the archivist's history always spirals like that, and into a vault where objects sat under bell jars, each labeled in spidery handwriting. The knife that sang, the clock that froze time, the toy that cried at night, and then the sketch that reflected. First, he placed it on a table still under glass and lit 2 candles beside it. It wasn't just a sketch. It was a loupe drawing of Eliza Wren staring into a mirror in. The mirror was Eliza staring back, and in her mirror was someone else, another child. Another face impossible to identify, but the moment I saw it, I felt my breath catch. Because the child in the third reflection was Ava, she gasped beside me. We didn't speak, we just stared. The collector spoke softly. "Some say the sketch is a psychic loop, a curse that self-replicates. Others believe Eliza created something not just from memory, but from a future echo. Either way, once you see yourself in it, he starts to copy you." "I've seen myself," Ava whispered, "in dreams and reflections that weren't mine. We had to destroy the sketch, but when we tried to lift the glass, it wouldn't move. It wasn't locked, it was anchored. Like it had grown into the table." Ava reached down anyway, her fingers brushing the edge of the drawing, and the candles went out. Everything fell silent. Then the room began to echo with scratching sounds, dozens, maybe hundreds of pencils on paper. From inside the jars, from under the floor, from inside EC, saw my hands trembling, but my reflection in the bell jar was still, eyes locked on mine, smiling. He was in the drawing now. He had entered it the moment we touched the source. That's when I realized the sketch didn't capture Eliza, it created him. Eliza hadn't drawn a reflection, she had drawn a watcher. A placeholder for someone to always be behind the glass, and every time someone looked at that sketch, they became another window, another doorway, another mirror. We had to end it, so we did what no one else dared. We turned the sketch toward itself. I grabbed a small hand mirror from another display and placed it in front of the drawing. "Mirror facing drawing, drawing facing mirror," Ava whispered. "This is what happens when mirrors face mirrors, infinity." The sketch vibrated, the bell jars cracked. The collector screamed for us to stop, but we didn't. We held the mirror steady and watched as the reflection folded inward like a snake eating itself. Face of Eliza, then Ava, then me, then nothing, just blank white paper, no sketch, no watcher. Silence was over. We left without speaking. Ava didn't draw again after that, neither did I. The mirror in my apartment is still covered, but I don't feel watched anymore. And yet last night at 10:43 p.m. I heard scratching sounds behind the wall, and when I pressed my ear to the drywall, I heard a child's voice whisper, "Draw me again." The end didn't begin with a scream or a broken mirror or a warning. It began with silence, that particular kind that only happens after someone vanishes. Ava was gone. No notes, no trail. One morning she was in her dorm emailing me a voice memo about a weird blur that kept showing up in her webcam, and the next her room was empty. Her bed untouched. Her roommate said she never came back from the library. I tried calling. Nothing, messaging, nothing. Then the final email came, not from her, but from her inbox subject. "She's not looking anymore." There was no text, just an image, a photo of me, not current, not posed, but real, taken from inside my apartment, showing me curled up on the couch, sketchbook on my lap, sleeping. The angle wasn't from a window or a camera, it was from the mirror behind my desk. The one I kept covered for months. Somehow he'd seen through it anyway. I called Janine, she didn't answer. I called the archivist number, disconnected. I was alone again, the way it had started. But this time the weight wasn't fear, it was responsibility. Ava was taken. Ava had stared too long. Ava had seen him, sketched him, and become a mirror herself. I sat in the dark, remembering what the collector said. You can't kill a pattern, you can only contain it. Or enter it. That last part stayed with me, enter it. The original sketch had erased itself, but the reflections, they hadn't all closed somewhere. Out there he still lived in glass and graphite, whispering through angles, blinking through frames. I needed to go to the source, not the sketch, not the mirror. By him I unpacked the red envelope Janine had given me, the one she told me to burn. I never had inside. It was a second sheet I hadn't noticed before. It showed a series of instructions written in frantic cursive. It said, "Burn something that saw him, whisper your own name 3 times into a mirror, sketch yourself without looking, wait. When that he comes, don't blink, don't move, don't speak, and when he reaches through the glass, grab his hand." It sounded like suicide, but Ava deserved more than silence. If she was inside trapped somewhere between sketch and shadow, then maybe I could pull her out. Maybe I could rewrite the pattern from inside. Maybe I could break it. So I followed the steps. I burned one of my earliest drawings of him, watched the flames curl around the page, blackening the red dots like dying stars. Then I stood before the mirror, the one I had covered, avoided, feared. I pulled the sheet down, my reflection stared back. Hollow-eyed and sleep-starved, I whispered my name 3 times, Nora, 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 then. I sat down and sketched, not looking at myself, only feeling every curve, every flaw, every fracture. I didn't stop until the page felt alive in my hands, and then I waited. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 10:43 p.m., and then it happened, not all at once, but in a drip of unreality, like the world peeled open just a little. My reflection didn't move, it watched. Then slowly its hand reached out, not toward me, but toward the other side. The glass bulged like a surface stretched from behind, fingers pressed against it. Thin, long, familiar. I stood, my body was trembling, but my mind was numb. I stepped forward, the glass rippled again. And then, with the stillness of a dream, dreamer. A hand reached through it, didn't grab me. Waited, I remembered the last line. Grab his hand, so I did, and everything exploded, not in light, not in color, but in echo, a thunderous blast of forgotten sounds, whispers, sketches, tearing glass, cracking screams. Reversed voices layered on top of each other like 1,000 versions of me, all crying out at once. I was falling not downward but inward into the reflection, into a realm of silver and memory and sketches, still drawing themselves in mid-air. Was inside the pattern now. It was a maze, each hallway made of mirrors, each mirror showing a version of me, scared, brave, broken, possessed. And each one watched by him, the watcher. He wore no face. He barred mine, sometimes Ava's, sometimes Eliza's. He was never whole. He was always echoing, feeding on those who couldn't stop looking. I moved through the maze, calling for Ava. The mirrors tried to trick me, showed me her face, but always warped. Always wrong. Then I found her trapped behind a tall frame, eyes wide, hand pressed to the glass like she'd been calling out for centuries. I moved forward, but the glass wouldn't break. I needed something, a reflection that couldn't reflect. I looked around, and that's when I remembered Janine's words, show him what he can't draw. I opened my notebook and, instead of sketching Ava, I wrote her name in ink in bold letters, no image, no face, just the truth of her name. The glass shattered. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing, gasping, real. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. We found our way back through the maze. Mirror after mirror cracking as we passed the walls, weakening the world, fraying at the edges. The watcher was behind us, screaming, not with sound, but with light. He was unraveling. His pattern broken, we had become unpredictable. We had stopped looking. We reached the mirror that led home. One last sheet of glass. I turned to Ava. If we go back, it ends for us. We forget. We lose it all. She nodded. Good. We stepped through, and I woke up on my couch, daylight, no sketchbook in sight, no mirrors in the apartment, no memory of drawing except a single red envelope on my desk inside. A blank piece of paper and one line handwritten at the bottom. He only exists if you look. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. Thank you for watching and not blinking. What part of the story shook you the most? Let us know in the comments if you felt like someone else was watching while you watching this. Maybe they were alike. Share, subscribe, and remember, not all windows look outside, some wait for you to open them from within.